Hi and welcome. I'm HR and this is Homebody Rundown. For the past 5 weeks, I have been participating in the Three Reverse Challenge, which is a use the food up in your house kind of challenge. Link in the description to the channel that inspired me to do this. Some people avoid going to the store completely. However, I am not doing that. This last month, I went to the store for dairy, produce, and protein like eggs, but did not stock up on anything. This month I am changing that up a bit and giving myself a grocery budget of $75 a week. We typically buy natural and organic foods, so $75 doesn't go very far. This week I did not make it to Costco like I had planned, so only bought a few things at the local grocery store in my town and will roll over any extra budget to next week. And I want to be clear, this budget is only for food and does not include any of the other stuff we buy. My primary goal with this is to use up older foods and make an assessment of what I tend to stock up on. I've already found things that we ended up not liking and needed to be thrown out, and I've decided to reorganize the pantry and most of my non-frozen food storage so it's easier to keep tabs on what we have and what needs to be used. When I get that finished, I will put out a video on how I changed things up as far as food storage goes. We are a family of 5, but the oldest is at college right now, so just feeding 4 of us. However, I stay at home, the 2 kids homeschool, and my husband works at home several days a week. So we are eating most of our meals here at the house. 3 of us eat a mostly vegetarian diet. We do include fish and seafood on occasion. And if we have people over or we go out to dinner with people this month, we are not including that expense in the grocery budget, but that's usually just a couple times a month. Also, I do not show everything that we eat in a week. Sometimes people just make a sandwich. We frequently have leftovers, or people do their own thing. My kids are teenagers, so they can make their own food. As for the stuff that I made this week and included in the video, there were some big hits and there were a few misses. Things just don't always work out, especially if you're like me and really don't follow any recipes. Went to Walmart on this morning for a few things and picked up 2 grocery items, a bag of avocados and a bag of onions. The avocados were $3.98 for a 4 count, and the onions, it's a 3-pound bag, was $2.14. The avocados aren't quite ripe enough, so I'm going to try putting a couple in a paper bag with a banana. I've never tried this before, just found this idea online. Now I'm going to make some granola. This is not a large batch. I'm pretty much the only one who eats granola right now. I use regular oats, salt, maple syrup, honey, vanilla, and cinnamon. I also add slivered almonds. I buy those at Sam's Club. I feel like they are a very good price there. For the fat, today I melted down some shortening. In the past, I have used coconut oil when I have that. I like to mix this in the KitchenAid. It combines everything perfectly. I line a baking sheet with parchment paper and spread the granola out into an even layer. Since I'm the only one eating this, it would not be very expensive to just buy granola at the store, but I prefer to make it myself because I can make a softer granola. My jaw tends to dislocate, so I can't eat much of anything if it's really hard, and it seems like a lot of the store granolas are. I bake this in the oven at 350 degrees for a total of 25 minutes, but I take it out and stir it at about the halfway point. This is the finished granola. I usually stir it and then spread it back into a thin layer and let it cool completely before I put it in a jar. I usually break up any large clumps. And a nice thing about using parchment paper is that it makes it very easy to get the granola into the container. I'm using a 1/2 gallon jar here, but it doesn't even fill it up halfway. I could have used a smaller container. For lunch, I'm going to roast some frozen green beans. I am emptying this bag, and I'm not sure if I have another bag in the deep freeze. I'll have to check that before I go to Costco. Anyway, be careful when roasting things that have a lot of moisture. At least with my oven, it puts out a lot of steam. So I always stand back when I open the door. Adding some olive oil, salt, pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder, and this adobo seasoning from Frontier Co-op. I buy this at Whole Foods. Also, I am baking these on parchment paper and just using the same cookie sheet I used for the granola earlier. The beans are done and they taste fantastic, and now I'm going to make up a quick sauce kind of thing for some already cooked penne I have in the refrigerator. These are most of the flavors I'll use. Adding in olive oil and some chopped garlic, also seasonings. This includes parsley, black pepper, roasted garlic powder, and an Italian seasoning blend that I mixed up. This is an Edwards & Sons not chicken bouillon cube. Let this cook for a couple minutes and added red pepper flakes. Cook that for another minute, and now putting in some water and some milk and nutritional yeast. Then the pre-cooked whole wheat pasta. Warmed the pasta through, and now I'm adding on some grated and some shredded Parmesan cheese. This was a bad idea to stir it in. I'm not sure which or both cheeses did this, but it really clumped up and didn't melt in at all. I did also add lemon juice, which I didn't show, but maybe that affected it also. I should have just sprinkled the cheese on top and put it under the broiler for a minute, but it did have good flavor and it was an easy, quick lunch. It's the next day and I'm checking these avocados I put in the bag with the banana. One is definitely soft enough now, but I'm not sure about the other one. But either way, I need to use it because I'm going to make California rolls for dinner. I will be using a red pepper, chopped roasted peanuts, sushi nori, which is roasted seaweed. We will use wasabi as a condiment. I like to buy this one at Whole Foods because it doesn't have food dye. I will season the rice with salt, sugar, and rice vinegar. Just making the rice on the stove. I make all my other rices in the Instant Pot, but I do this one on the stove because I don't need very much. Prepping the ingredients, not too exciting, so going to speed this up. Alright, moment of truth for these avocados. And this first one looks perfect. And so does the second one. And they both did taste great as well. I cut the peppers and the avocados into strips since they are going to be in a roll. Sometimes I will save myself time by not making rolls. I will just chop all the ingredients and put them in a bowl. I cover the bamboo sushi rolling mat in plastic wrap. I make sure that all of the edges are completely enclosed because cleaning this mat is a pain and it takes a while to dry. Seasoning the rice and letting it cool down a little before I make the rolls. This is my setup. I'm making these several hours before we're going to eat, so I will put them in Tupperware and put them in the refrigerator. So the rice did not turn out well. It's a little gummy. I initially thought it was just using this new range, but later I realized when I was cleaning out the pantry that I have two types of sushi rice. So I probably should have labeled them because I don't think the water to rice ratios are the same. I used to always get nishiki sushi rice, but I think this is the Lundberg sushi rice. Anyway, I wasn't going to remake the rice. It's just for us, so I used it. This is a rather time-consuming process, so I'm speeding this video up as well, adding on some roasted sesame seeds, then avocado, red peppers, and the chopped peanuts. And then using the mat, I roll it up as tightly as I can. The end of the rolls are usually not filled, so I will add in some avocado or some rice to help them hold their shape. Then I repeat this process 4 more times. I don't use up all of the rice. I usually have about a cup left over, which is fine. I like to eat the seasoned sushi rice. Here's my plate with soy sauce and wasabi. I buy these bamboo chopsticks at Walmart. They are very affordable, $2.44 at my local Walmart for a 12-pack. Despite the rice, these still tasted very good. Making an egg sandwich for middle child for lunch on this day. The pan was a little hot, so the egg is a bit of a crazy shape. Adding on some shredded sharp cheddar cheese. I want to make sure to use this up soonish before it goes bad. Lightly toasted the whole wheat bread and buttered one of the slices. I don't make the kids lunch every day, probably once or twice a week, and it's usually something very easy like this or pasta. Dinner tonight will be leftovers. We have a lot of options in the refrigerator we need to use up, but I am going to make some brown rice to go along with whatever people choose. I thought I was almost out of brown rice, but found another jar in the pantry, so I'll be able to make rice a couple times this month. I think one good thing about this pantry challenge for me has just been clearing out a little more shelf space and finding those random things that got pushed behind other things. It's the next morning, and this is what I use that granola I made for. I defrost some blueberries and add non-fat Greek yogurt, granola, and honey. Going to cook lentils for lunch today, so I'm giving these a good rinse. I think these are fairly old, so I don't know if they'll need a little extra cooking time. And I don't even know exactly what kind these are. I'm assuming they're just a green lentil, maybe? I have several boxes of these Edward & Sons not chicken bouillon cubes that I need to use up, so I'm adding one to the water. I'm going to make a curried lentil dish, and these are most of the spices I will add, along with tomatoes and cream. More sped up video. I'm dicing up garlic, red peppers, and onions for the lentils. Also, I don't have any fresh ginger, so I will add some powdered ginger as well. Sliced a couple more peppers to dip in hummus, and I have to say these peppers taste wonderful. This is my first time buying them. They are organic Whole Foods brand peppers. My husband is just warming up some split pea soup for lunch, so I am making him a grilled cheese to go along with that, using some sourdough bread and this Swiss cheese from Whole Foods. I had also gotten some Swiss cheese from Trader Joe's, and I have to say, this 365 Whole Foods brand tastes much better, more flavor. I found 3 rather old packages of ramen noodles in the pantry when I was cleaning today, so making those for the kids' lunch. I do not use the spice packets that come with ramen. I haven't made ramen in a long time, and I'm realizing this was way too much ramen for 2 people. I usually just make this when someone is sick. It's a really good comfort food. I drained most of the water, but not all of it, because the noodles will absorb more liquid as they cool. I'm adding some Kerrygold butter and a mix of garlic salt and garlic powder. This is just what the kids like. For the lentils, I'm starting with olive oil and cooking the onions for a few minutes. Now the chopped peppers and the chopped garlic. Also adding in the seasonings. As usual, I'm not measuring anything and I'm not following a recipe. However, this was inspired and is fairly similar to a curried lentil recipe from Pinch of Yum. I will link the recipe in the description, but to be clear, I am not following that recipe, but a lot of the flavors and ingredients are similar. And I have followed that recipe years ago and it was delicious. This is the red curry paste, the tomato sauce, and the lentils. Stirred this together and tasted it. Decided to add in some more chili flakes. And this is cilantro that I had cleaned and chopped and put in the freezer. Also added a tiny amount of sugar. Let it simmer for a few minutes and gave it one final taste. It tasted great, so I'm adding in the heavy cream. I have also used coconut milk, which is excellent. This is my plate. I warmed up some of the brown rice I made last night and put the curry lentils on top. I sometimes have Greek yogurt or sour cream on this, but I had fresh tomatoes and that sounded good today. Tonight I'm going to soak these beans. I know they are old. In fact, I don't even remember what they are. Maybe navy beans? Either way, I'm going to get them rinsed and soaking in a brine. First, I will sort through them and look for anything that shouldn't be there. There were more beans here than I really processed, so I should have gotten a larger container, but I'm not going to since this is already dirty. Next morning, and the beans have absorbed a lot of water. I do cover the beans when they're soaking overnight with something just to keep dust out. We'll rinse them well before I get them into the Instant Pot with new water. And to be clear, I didn't show it in any of the video clips, but I did add water in with these beans in the Instant Pot. I also added some onion powder and garlic powder, and please make sure to follow the directions for your specific pressure cooker. Timer is done, so letting this vent. I had to go pick youngest child up from community college and then had to run an errand, so these sat in here way longer than they needed to, and they are very overcooked, but it's fine. I am planning to just add some to cheesy broccoli and rice, and they can dissolve in the sauce. I'll make a small amount into soup and probably put the rest in the freezer, so they'll just also be for soup. So this balsamic vinegar is getting old, and I just don't use it enough, so I thought I would make a balsamic glaze. I will link the recipe I'm using in the description. I'm just going to say it now that I regret making this. This recipe is just balsamic vinegar and brown sugar. I don't have much knowledge at all about vinegar, so it's possible maybe there are different types of balsamic vinegar and I used the wrong one, but cooking this in the house was a really terrible decision. It smelled so bad. Every time I had to go buy it and stir it, it made my eyes water. I think at one point I was coughing. Youngest child came downstairs to ask what the horrid smell was that was making her nauseous. I ended up opening several windows for several hours, which is not cheap if you live where it's cold, like I do, and your furnace is running all the time. I think I ended up lighting all of my scented candles in the entire house. If I ever do this again, I'll do it outside. Alright, need to refill the salt and get some items into jars because I don't want to look at the packaging. This box of kosher salt is almost empty and it is pouring so slowly, but it was too hard to open the box. Speeding this up some, these butter cookies have been out for over a week, so I will get them in a jar. They will probably be eaten quicker if people can see them. Of course, they are different flavors, so this may not be ideal for everyone. Also opened this box of rosemary and olive oil toasted crackers. I had not had these before, but they're pretty good. And I did get them all to fit in this quart jar. I'm going to make pizza tonight using this King Arthur 00 pizza flour. This has been in the pantry for a while. I mean, less than a year, but still I need to use it up. There is a recipe on the back of the bag, but you have to let it rest overnight. So they have a QR code for a 3-hour pizza dough, and I'm going to try that. I will link the recipe in the description. It's flour, water, yeast, oil, and salt. I'm using the dough hook on my KitchenAid mixer, and it worked very well for this. I think it has kneaded long enough. I'm supposed to put the dough into a greased pan to rise, but I'm just going to shape it into a ball and spray the bowl on top of the dough with some avocado oil spray. Putting this into the oven on the proof setting to rise. Not going to lie, I did not read the manual, and the only reason I think this is what I should do is because I've watched the Great British Bake Off. The balsamic glaze has cooled down and the house is smelling a little better. This definitely is coating the back of the spoon and reduced down, maybe a little longer than it needed to, but it's about half of the vinegar I started with. Going to pour it into this squeezy bottle so it's easier to put on the pizza tonight. Completely unrelated to food, but I was in the kitchen and saw the sun come out. I think it's been well over a week since I've seen the sun shining, and this was gone in about 10 minutes and back to gray. We are in southwest Michigan. The first rise is done, and I am supposed to divide the dough. I am just going to punch it down, tear it in half, and form 2 sections of dough. And I'm not going to put them in separate pans or spread out. I'm just going to throw them back into this KitchenAid bowl and let them rise a second time. I'm going to make the pizza on 2 different surfaces. One will be this pizza stone, which can bake at a hotter temp. The other will be on this baking sheet with a wire rack and a piece of parchment on top. This would need to bake at a lower temperature because parchment paper cannot be used at really high temperatures. Make sure to check your paper. I know from personal experience that it can catch on fire. The parchment may hinder the baking process, especially the crisping of the crust. It may get steamy under there. It's just an idea I wanted to try. Definitely not what the recipe says to do, so just be aware. This dough is very easy to roll out. It's soft and light, if that's the right word for it. Going to roll this second dough out into more of a circular shape for the baking stone. I think the stone is from Pampered Chef, way back in the day. I don't even know if they still do those parties anymore. I did roll this out fairly thin, which is what we prefer, and it is a little large, but it will shrink as it rests on the counter for a while. Cooking some onions to go on the pizza. Season these with salt, pepper, garlic, and onion powder, and olive oil. This goat cheese is best by February 19th, so going to open one section and get it used up. We really love goat cheese on our pizzas. This first pizza will be for the kids, just cheese and sauce. This sauce is from Whole Foods, finishing up a bag of shredded mozzarella from Trader Joe's, but it won't be enough, so I got out a frozen bag of mozzarella that's also from Whole Foods and sprinkled a little bit of garlic salt on top. Toppings for the pizza for myself and my husband are tomatoes, goat cheese, and onions. Won't put the arugula on until the pizza is done. Okay, may have let this one go a little too long, at least as far as the cheese goes, but the crust was baked through. It did not get browned on the bottom, but it also was not soggy. So I know this is probably not safe practices because this pizza stone is super hot and you should not do this. In a perfect world, I'd have one of those pizza peels so I could have the pizza all prepped and just slide it onto the baking stone, but alas, I do not. So we are just going to hustle and make the pizza on this very hot stone, putting down a little bit of cornmeal so nothing sticks when it comes out of the oven. It's important, at least to us, to get it off the pizza stone as quickly as possible. Otherwise, it'll get really hard because it will keep baking. Added sauce, goat cheese, tomatoes, sauteed onions, and a little mozzarella cheese. It just helps hold everything in place. Here's how it looked coming out of the oven. Now I'm adding on the chopped arugula and finally some of that balsamic glaze. And I have to admit, the balsamic glaze tasted amazing. This pizza was delicious and I will 100% keep making this crust. However, I probably won't use the baking sheet with parchment paper again. I'll just use cast iron like I've done before, especially when we cook on the grill. Here's a close-up of the crust. It completely baked through, but was still soft. So good. It's the next day, and I'm going to make some stir fry with cooked rice, vegetables, and this block of tofu I picked up at Trader Joe's last month. This is my first time getting Trader Joe's tofu, and it seems more dry than what I usually get at Whole Foods, but I'm still going to wrap it up in some paper towels and a towel to absorb more moisture from it. Going to dice up most of these sliced peppers. There are still several whole peppers in the refrigerator I can slice up for eating later. Also chopping up some garlic and one yellow onion. Getting these vegetables into the pan so I can use the cutting board for the tofu. Speeding it up here, I'm dicing the tofu. Typically I would cut it into smaller pieces and dredge it in some cornstarch and shallow fry it to get it really crispy. Or I bake it in the oven with a sauce, but today I am following a real recipe and I will link that in the description. Adding some olive oil and some cornstarch and mixing that together. Then adding the seasonings. This is black pepper, garlic, onion powder, and salt, and mixing those together as well. Putting the tofu on a baking sheet with a piece of parchment paper, I will spread these into a single layer and give each piece some space. Forgot I had this coleslaw mix, so I'm going to chop this up a little bit smaller and I'll add that to the stir fry as well. Here's what I'll use to add flavor: toasted sesame oil. I should be able to finish up this organic peanut sauce. And the Japanese barbecue sauce has plenty of sodium. The peanut sauce has a little, and also some rice vinegar. I am not using this today, but thought I would show it to you. It's General Tso's stir-fry sauce from Trader Joe's. This is what I use sometimes for tofu or cauliflower that I'm roasting in the oven. Typically, I'll add it later in the baking or roasting process because it has so much sugar it tends to burn, but it's very delicious. Using some avocado oil and some toasted sesame oil to start cooking the veggies. Also some Japanese barbecue sauce. The tofu is halfway through its baking time. I'm supposed to turn these now. Cooked down the vegetables for a few minutes before adding the cabbage because I don't want the cabbage to get mushy. Finally, adding in the cooked rice and some peanut sauce and vinegar, giving this a final taste to see if it needs anything else, but it was good. The tofu are done. These were pretty good. My husband really liked them. They were definitely more well-baked or chewier than what I usually do, but not that that's bad. Also, I'm wondering if it would have made a little difference with a different brand of tofu. Here's my bowl. I like to add sesame seeds and sriracha hot sauce. Went to the local Martin's grocery store. Picked up Aunt Millie's whole grain hamburger buns. 8 count was $3.99. Picked up some Alexia organic Yukon Select French fries for the kids and a friend they had over. Those were $5.79 and 1.37 pounds. They had the Dave's Killer Organic plain bagels in stock, so I got 2. Those were $5.89 each for a total of $11.78. And finally, a Prairie Farms lactose-free 2% milk, and the total for that was $4.19. The grand total for this trip was $25.75. I bought a big bunch of bananas last week because at the store I thought they sounded good, but then at home every time I looked at them they just sounded gross. So I'm going to get these peeled and put into the freezer, and when it warms up a little bit I'll make some smoothies. I am taking the time to look for any bad spots and cut those off. I need toasted bread cubes for a recipe, so I got out bread cubes from the freezer. Most of them are croissants, but I dug through the dish and pulled out as many of the non-croissant bread as I could find and just put them in the toaster oven for a few minutes. I'm going to make a recipe for Greek feta burgers. It's a recipe I know I've made in the past several times, although I don't think I've ever followed the recipe exactly, and I'm not being exact today either. Anyway, I want to see if I even want to keep this recipe around. Spoiler alert, I don't. I did replace some of the olive oil with mayonnaise, but I don't think that was a big issue. I was already skeptical about putting raw garlic into these burgers, and yeah, it's not great. I think just using regular breadcrumbs would be better than the bread cubes. It would help it adhere more. Also, I didn't exactly measure stuff, so that's totally on me. But I don't want to keep a recipe that can't handle that. This is the eggs, bread cubes, garlic, feta cheese, drained spinach, oregano, dill, and black pepper, olive oil, and mayo. I did let this sit for a few minutes. And this is frozen spinach, by the way. Also, you were supposed to use a non-stick pan. I don't have a non-stick pan. I went with this enameled cast iron. It would have been better to use regular cast iron, so I could have used a metal utensil to scrape these or lift them off the bottom. They were just not staying cohesive, plus the crust was sticking onto the bottom badly. So I made the decision that this would just become a scramble. I had already checked the temperature inside the burgers with a digital thermometer, and they were hot enough. So put it under the broiler for a few minutes just to get a little more crispiness or crunch. This still tasted fine. I mean, it does have a lot of cheese in it and fat, but I will not keep the recipe. Here's my plate, once again adding tomatoes, and I decided to add some of the balsamic glaze. I know that I like that with feta cheese and figured it would be good with spinach and tomatoes as well. And it was. It added a lot, actually. Finally, for food this week, I am making some cheesy broccoli and rice. I just make this up as I go. I'm using up 2 bags of frozen broccoli florets. I'm roasting them in the oven with some olive oil and spray avocado oil, salt, pepper, garlic, and onion powder. And as always, be careful, they are steamy. Added some oil and butter to this pan and let it melt. And then adding roasted garlic that I had in the freezer and defrosted. Then better than bouillon, vegetable bouillon. Added flour, and then going to speed up this next part, I just keep whisking in water and milk until it seems like it's the right consistency. Chopped up the first sheet pan of roasted broccoli so it's more bite size, adding in the last of this extra sharp shredded cheddar and letting that melt. Then the cooked brown rice and stirring in the broccoli. Forgot that I wanted to add in these beans that I made, the ones I'm not sure what kind they are. I should have added these before the rice and broccoli, but it's fine. I'm adding more milk and I'll get them blended in. I've never done this before, but I figured it would be an easy way to get more nutrients into this mix. I didn't add a crazy amount, and you could taste them a little. Adding in the last of the broccoli. It was getting a little thick, so I added some more water, giving it a taste and adding some more seasonings, including nutritional yeast, which I forgot to film. So this does not look great, but it tasted good. I'm sure it would be even better with white rice instead of brown rice, but middle child said he really liked it. Overall, this week of Pantry Challenge went pretty well. I'm not going to lie, I do miss using more convenience foods, but it's really been nice to get through some more stuff in the pantry. I forgot to film it, but I also picked up a few donuts and a loaf of bread. That was a total of $8.76, which leaves me about $40 to add to next week's $75 budget. And as always, thanks for watching.